What is up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. I'm your host, Drew Hoover, and this is your Average Joe Sports Network. First of all, I just want to apologize for my absence. I've been trying to get ready to move down to Orlando. Been trying to sell some stuff, get the apartment ready and apply for jobs. But I finally got down to it, did my research, did some video editing, and now I'm ready to start doing videos. At this moment, I'm not ready to start making a schedule to know, every Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever. So I'll just make movies as they go until I've settled into Orlando. Also, I mentioned a mock draft in my introduction video. I'll only be doing one because of the format, because of the video versus posting an article like NFL.com or ESPN does, where they can do it multiple times, and like I said, because of articles, they can explain it in length. So I'm only going to do it once, and probably a few days before the actual NFL draft. Plus, by that time, scouting, combine will be done, the pro days, and like I said, the free agency just started this week. So by that time, all will have unfolded, and we will have had all that we need to know. I can evaluate, analyze, and put together my one and only 2021 NFL mock draft. And so this video is going to be about draft needs, starting with the AFC North. I will go division by division, discussing the 4 teams in those divisions, their needs, and how they can address it, particularly in the draft and in the first few picks, because that's where the top college players are going to be. So let's get started with this with the Baltimore Ravens, because honestly, they're the team that surprised me. I know that's saying much considering that 2029, Lamar Jackson won the MVP and they were the number 1 seed. Well, heading into the wild card this year, obviously they didn't repeat those achievements, but also Derrick Henry in the last 2 matchups had rushed for over 200 yards against this team. So I thought the writing was all over the wall. Obviously, I was wrong, and honestly, I was glad to be wrong. Lamar Jackson won his first playoff game, and, so they're slowly moving forward and getting better. So how do you proceed moving forward? I think they got to go with the defensive side, honestly, and I know that's weird saying that because they're more of an offensive-oriented team now. They used to be all about the defense, starting when they drafted Ray Lewis, and they had players like Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs. But pretty much since the hiring of offensive coordinator Greg Roman, they've pretty much changed priorities. And they pretty much have been blind to some of the needs that they need on defense. Not to say they haven't tried. They've got players like Calais Campbell, Earl Thomas, Marcus Peters. But like I said, free agents started this week, which means 7 of the players on their front 7 went to the free agent market, and they just lost Matt Judon, who signed to New England. So I think they definitely need a pass rusher. And there's a guy from Wake Forest that I think they could possibly pursue, Carlos Bosham Jr. To me, this young man, when you talk about the top awards in the country, talk about the Chuck Bednarik Award. Again, if I mispronounce names in any of these videos, please correct me. The Bronco Nagurski Award, the Lot Impact Trophy. His name has constantly been sprinkled around through all those. He won the Arnold Palmer Award. In 2019, he got 13 sacks, which was the most that a player had in his program since 1992. So he's definitely a playmaker. He can get off the edge. Maybe not as quickly as some people would like, but I think he could fit very well in there. But obviously, if you've been focused on offense for so long, why stop now, right? And like I said, they have offensive coordinator Greg Roman under John Harbaugh, who used to be the offensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh back in San Francisco. And as you can see, there's a lot of similarities between the offense he had then and now. He's got his new Colin Kaepernick and Lamar Jackson. He's got a new Frank Gore with J.K. Dobbins. I think they need to draft maybe another wide receiver. They do have Marquise Brown. They have tight end Mark Andrews. but they don't have a wide receiver that I would say is number one. Not like a Michael Crabtree or anything. But there's a guy that's at 6'2" that just ran a 4.3 at his pro day, and that is Rashad Bateman, wide receiver from Minnesota. And man, just look at his 2019 year. It was amazing. I mean, in one game, he broke the record for most receiving yards by a Gopher, and that was 203 against Penn State. He was all Big Ten first team. He was the Big Ten Receiver of the Year. He was a finalist for the Fred Biletnikoff Award. I mean, the stats speak for himself. And like I said, the fact that he ran a 4.3 when no one expected him to, they probably expected maybe a 4.5, a 4.6 speed. For a guy of his size to run that fast, I think a lot of teams will have a second look at him. And if I'm the Baltimore Ravens looking for a receiver, I think I would go with Rashad Bateman. All right, let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who were the number one pick a year ago and drafted Joe Burrow number one. And, even though he got injured later in the season, I think they were happy with what they saw. They got Tyler Boyd as the number one wide receiver. They got T. Higgins at number two. And they have a running back in Joe Mixon, which I believe if he stays healthy this year, could end up being a top 5 running back. So it's all just a matter of protection right here. They drafted Jonah Williams from Alabama a few years ago, but obviously there's still a lot of work to be done. And when you're number 5 now, you could draft the best offensive line in the draft, and that's Penei Sewell, offensive tackle from Oregon. This young man has done a lot. He has only had 1 sack in, get this, 1,376 snaps in 2 seasons. And he's one of 3 Ducks, LaMichael James and Marcus Mariota, to be unanimously first-team All-American. He won the Outland Trophy, and you know what? I mean, like I said, if you're Joe Burrow or Ryan Finley, whoever starts, this year, and you got sacked 48 times altogether, you definitely want some protection on you, and Penei Sewell is definitely there. But what if they decide to go defensive side? What if they're like, you know what? Our defense only sacked the quarterback 17 times last year. We want an edge rusher. They let Carlos Dunlap go. He went to Seattle, which, by the way, his time there is already done. Geno Atkins' days are numbered. The defensive linemen in this draft are, not to say they're not good, they're just, you don't see a player like Chase Young, which Bucky Brooks, in his opinion, said was a future Hall of Famer. And there's not a lot of depth. I don't see a draft where you're seeing maybe 10 to a dozen defensive linemen picked in this draft. In fact, there are some analysts that when they construct their mock drafts don't have a defensive lineman coming off the board until outside the top 20. But if you're Cincinnati and you're at number 5, and you want a defensive lineman so bad, I mean, you got to think, people talk about teams trading up to draft a quarterback. If Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence are gone by then, and you want a guy like Trey Lance or Justin Fields, people have been saying number 8, Carolina could be a trading spot. I personally think number 4 with the Atlanta Falcons could be a potential trading spot, and this spot right here, number 5, could be a potential trading spot. But let's just say, they're not satisfied with what they hear, and they want to stay where they're at, and they are determined to get a pass rusher. Then it has to be Gregory Rousseau, the defense end from Miami. Now, a lot of people say, would this be a stretch? But remember, a few years ago, Khalil Farrell was considered to be a lineman that wasn't going to be drafted until the 20s. I think it was Seattle and Ravens at 20 and 22. But then the Raiders picked him at number 4. And I believe, like I said, it just depends on the need and how much they like him. And when I look at this guy, he kind of reminds me of Myles Garrett. Obviously, he doesn't have the same explosiveness and dominance, but he's got the motor. He knows how to use his hands. And like I said, if you're starting almost completely from scratch on the defensive line, you can't go wrong with Gregory Rousseau, in my opinion. And so let's go to the Cleveland Browns because they just won a playoff game for the first time in feels like forever. And they did it against their rivals, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I remember commentators after they lost to the Chiefs, which by the way was they barely lost. They said, you can't look at the Browns the same way again. These guys are now competitors. And so how do the Browns stay competitive without taking a step back and instead take a step even closer to possibly their first Super Bowl appearance? And so I look at the offensive side. You got Baker Mayfield. You got 2 running backs in the backfield with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. The trade market for Odell Beckham is always hot and cold. At this point, I'm hearing nothing. It is cold. So far, Odell Beckham is staying, and so is Jarvis Landry. If I'm Kevin Stefanski and I'm like, you know what? I want to take this offense to the next level. I want to show defense something that they've never seen before from us. If you want a playmaker that brings that to the table, Rondale Moore, wide receiver from Purdue, could give you just that. If you want to add some reverses, if you want to add some trick plays, I mean, everyone's looking for the next Tyreek Hill out there. I mean, this guy in college was considered the most versatile player in all of college football. Man, if you give this guy a go route, I think he would beat most cornerbacks and safeties in the NFL. And so if you're looking for a difference maker to give that offense a different feel, I think Rondale Moore is your guy. But if you go defense, I was pretty impressed the way they played against the Chiefs. They did show some weakness against the Steelers when they won. They still have Myles Garrett on the front. They got Denzel Ward on the back end. Maybe they just need a all-star middle linebacker. I mean, honestly, if you're in the AFC North, it's kind of a given. Steelers, Jake Lambert and Jack Ham in the 70s. In the last 20 years, James Ferrier, Larry Foote, Lawrence Timmons, Ryan Shazier, and now Devin Bush. And the Ravens, Ray Lewis, C.J. Mosley, and now Patrick Queen. And there's a guy in this draft that isn't considered the best linebacker in the draft by most regard, but to me is going to have the most successful career of all these linebackers. And I'm going to try to pronounce this right. Jeremiah Owusu-Koromoah, the linebacker from Notre Dame. This guy was the Dick Butkus award winner. This guy was unanimous first team All-American, first team ACC. This guy, if you're looking for the next Patrick Willis or Luke Kuechly, I think this guy is it. You can run from sideline to sideline. I feel like when I watch the film and I watch him hit a guy, I feel like I'm watching old school football. You don't see a lot of linebackers hit like that a lot anymore because they're afraid of, targeting whatever. But I think this guy can bring a lot to the table. And if you're Cleveland and you're looking for your quarterback of your defense, this guy could be your linebacker for the next 10 to 20 years, I believe. And finally, but certainly not least, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Man, was that a wake-up call for the Steelers to lose to the Browns. And I still have that image of my mind of Ben Roethlisberger in the corner on the bench, just in shock. And it's had a ripple effect, They made some changes to the coaching staff. Marquise Pouncey's retiring. At this point, nothing's happened with Juju Smith-Schuster or James Conner, who are now free agents. And to me, the need is to keep that offensive line going because they also have a left tackle they haven't signed back yet. So if they are sitting there and they need an offensive tackle, because again, they want to keep this going. They had the fewest sacks in the NFL last year with 14 sacks. So they want to keep Ben Roethlisberger upright, and they want to pave the way for whoever comes afterwards. If they decide to draft a quarterback later on or next year, whatever, they want to set the foundation. And so there's a guy named Elijah Vera-Tucker from USC that fits just well. I feel like he's been first team and second team Pac-12. I think of, similarities to Austin Jackson. Obviously, I don't think he's as tall as Austin Jackson, but I feel like he plays more efficiently. That's the word for it. And like I said, if you can't sign this guy back, and like I said, you probably with this year's salary cap, and stuff, you probably can't sign everybody back. A lot of people are making a lot of adjustments to their finances. If you can't sign the left tackle back for some reason, then I think that's where they go. But what if they go defense? I mean, if you're a Steelers fan, you're like, man, just go defense all day, every day, you know? You look at who they drafted the last few years. You talk about Devin Bush, TJ Watt. They got lucky in getting in a trade from Miami to get Minka Fitzpatrick. They did lose Bud Dupree in free agency. But I look at the three interior linemen. You got Stephen Truitt on one side, you Casey Hayward on another, one from Notre Dame, one from the Ohio State, and then you have this gap with a nose tackle. And I think you stick in the Midwest, and I might be biased because I'm wearing this hat, but Davion Nixon, the defensive tackle from Iowa, I think could be a great fit for the Steel Curtain, because this is a guy that totally disrupts the line of scrimmage, and he can totally stop a play before it even starts. You're talking about getting to the back before he's had a chance to get to the line of scrimmage. You're talking about if you have a quarterback, he can totally disrupt the inside of the pocket and make him scramble. And like I said, if you have a guy like TJ Watt, he can come around and clean out the mess. So, man, again, I might be a little bit biased, but yeah, so that is the draft needs from the AFC North. My next will be the AFC East. So I will be talking about the Bills. How do they keep momentum going? The Patriots, by the way, this week they've had a free agency frenzy. We'll see what they have left to do in the NFL draft. You got the Miami Dolphins. You got Brian Flores trying to duplicate what Bill Belichick did in New England. And then you have the New York Jets under Robert Saleh. And you have the number 2 pick, which a lot of people will say will be quarterback. But they got two picks in the first round, so we got to determine what they do with those as well. I'm Drew Hoover, and have a good one.